Oh,
chasing
and going
after
to
the
get somebody that,
Yeah. Well, I think what happened, because he was talking to their salesman on the phone. I think the Harbor Patrolman was actually on another call.
Well, good afternoon,
Oh,
ladies and
I see.
gentlemen, and welcome
Right,
to the
because
Tuesday,
he said
February
that the
16th,
salesman-
2016
Sure, I'm going
City
first.
Council work session.
Oh,
At
he
this time, I
did.
will call the meeting to order. I will mention that when it comes time for the GLE to be on our city council meeting, at that particular time, I will open it up for public hearing. During this particular one, this is a work session for the council to get all information. We're not going to be asking for input from outside of anybody but the Glacial Lakes area. So just wanted to get that clear and out there. So the first thing that we want to do is discussion on terms and assurances regarding the vacation of South Broadway. This is something that the council here as a work session council has seen, what, 2-3 times, I think? And it recently went through the planning commission and they came up with some suggestions. So I thought it would be important that we get a handle on what's going on and where we're at on that. So Jim, if you want to come on up to the podium, just kind of give us a little idea of what you're seeing and what you're hearing out there. And that'd be great. And guys and gals, I think that at any time, just throw those questions out to Jim. There's been a lot of questions out there on the South Broadway closure, so we'll kind of go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, my name is Jim Sire. I'm CEO at Glacial Lakes Energy. We're going to start here just by kind of, I don't think it's necessary that we kind of regurgitate the reason for the loop track project, but we do have a slide or two in here about it. So certainly welcome to your questions. We always want to answer questions. So I'm just going to kind of run through here. I got about 20-some slides, and then we'll open it up, or you can ask me as we go too. Doesn't matter. So here's the kind of an updated visual of schematic of the project, and I just want to point out a few things. Of course, the top of the map is north. If you work your way along the top here, you see 212. If you come down here, you can see the bypass. The pink line here is the existing service to Glacial Lakes Energy. We're down in the corner. You can actually see just a part of our corn pile here, that white structure or that white circle. So anything in red would be new rail. This solid green is the waterway through the property. And of course, here's Broadway as you work your way up. Here's HESCO, here's Little River City, Max, and Napa at the intersection of Broadway and 212. This is the Hanton Farm. This is a proposed tank farm and loadout facility that we would utilize as a part of this project. And let's see, this dotted line going through the property is a floodway. And we've got somebody from Austin here that can answer some questions more related to that if necessary. These red circles are wetland mitigation, where we would need to create wetlands. And of course, I'm sure this would be considered a wetland as well.
I think, Jim, if you may, that green one now, that's the direction that the water would travel, is it not?
We would
Because you've
create,
changed that.
yes, there was some concern over, would this project back the floodwaters into the city of Watertown in a high water event? So we designed the project with a box culverts right here on the north end. So when that water rises, it would come through here, and this is about a 5 to 6 foot swale, if you will, and it would make its way, and this is the lowest part of the property, so it would make its way over here and out the box culverts on this side, on the east side here. And then you can see these are existing box culverts under our, we'd have to create kind of a waterway going over here and allowing it to make its way back to the river, more or less from overflow waters in this area.
Jim, ask that farm site, how would they have access to and from that farm site?
The farm site, we purchased the entire property, and so there would be no access other than our own private access to that farm site. So any questions on this schematic? With that, I'll move ahead and make a few comments, and I've got another one of these at the end so we can come back to it. You know, there's been some questions out there and you know, on radio stations, in the news and whatever, you know, what's really the difference? And I wanted just to spend a moment on this to point out the difference. A unit train is a 96-car shipment originating from Watertown, which is destined for one unload facility. Whereas right now we're shipping single cars which originate here, and then they're destined for multiple locations. And as you can kind of think through that, if you can send 96 cars to one location, and right now we hit Dallas, Fort Worth, we hit Houston, we hit Seattle, Tacoma, and some other points. Whereas single cars might, surprisingly, Denver does not have a unit train facility, but we may end up sending single cars to Denver, Albuquerque, you know, points like that, San Diego. You know, they go to those multiple locations. Of course, it takes extra time for them to come back, and so that causes us to lease more cars to maintain our production levels. Typically, unit trains are reserved for large quantities of a homogeneous product. I think the best example I can remember, even growing up and spending time in Aberdeen, was the coal trains that used to come through there. And they would come from the west, and of course we all knew they were headed for the Big Stone plant, but that was the first example I ever saw as a child or a young man of a coal train or a unit train. And they stretch as far as you can see, you know, about 90, 100 cars. Grain is rapidly moving this direction, and I think out in our Mina plant area, we've, in the last 7 or 8 years, we've seen probably 6 or 7 unit train facilities pop up. Grain is shipped from that area to all points, including for export, out of that area with unit trains. Unit trains are more timely and efficient for the producer, which is Glacial Lakes Energy, the shipper, which is the BNSF, and the end customer, which could be somebody like, well, it could be for an export destination or multiple end customers. In a letter to the mayor a while back, the VP of Ag Products from the BNSF had this to say: "This project could potentially aid in reducing overall grade crossing times over the course of a day, because unit train service may result in fewer trains. Less overall train time at grade crossings can benefit commuters and other surface traffic." And I've got some statistics on that. I think I was asked to provide some information. I've got some more statistics coming up. The Loop Track project is all about efficiency and market access for GLE, but in our view, everybody comes away with wins here. Of course, GLE wins. We wouldn't be spending the $20 million if we didn't think there was something in here for us. Improved efficiency, greater market opportunities, and needed infrastructure improvements. The BNSF wins, increased market share, efficiencies of the unit train service as we know they want to continue to move that direction. In our view, the city wins. The BNSF service to this city is elevated to the next level. They are you know, if they're headed this direction, we want to provide as much cause for them to maintain the level of service that they currently provide. And in our view, rail service is very critical to the success, the economic success of this committee, and we're happy to be the majority of that service. Glacial Lakes Energy's increased long-term economic impact on the city. I've got some statistics on that coming later. Yeah, short-term economic activity from the construction project. We all love to see large projects like this come our way as a part of continued growth and economic development. And I could only hope that we were sitting here next year and the year after, and there's other businesses with a $20 million project in front of this council. a change in property tax assessment. We fully expect that this will lead to a change in that property that we purchased. And of course, with the improvements that we're gonna put on it, we fully expect that there will be some additional property tax assessments.
Well, Jim, based on that, what you're saying there is that all this is gonna be brought into the city, am I correct?
That would be our assumption, but
Yes.
even so, I mean, my understanding of the property taxes are that would make its way back to the county and to the school, and so city residents would
Yeah.
would
Well,
benefit.
You know, and I'm sure that we would prefer it to be annexed into the city, so I'm just throwing that out.
I don't know that we would oppose any effort to do that. And we feel there's a big win in this for the general public, you know, and this is maybe the biggest area that, outside of GLE. Enhanced highway accessibility, fewer railroad crossing events, trains keep moving, fewer idle tanker cars uptown. That was kind of brought to our attention by the fire department last meeting. Quite frankly, we weren't even aware of that, hadn't thought about it. We kind of made the assumption that, you know, we're used to being around loaded tanker cars, but not everybody else is. So, you know, so if there's some concern out there about that, this would give us the capability to take those cars in our own possession and keep them out of the main heart of the city. So let's just talk about the improved safety and accessibility for a minute. The current situation as a single car shipper, and we've all been there, the staging on arrival and departure causes traffic backups on US 212. And, you know, this is a classic. I think we've all had a front row seat to this where, you know, you're sitting there on 212 and you think, okay, here comes the end of the train, and then all of a sudden it starts to slow and it stops and it goes the other way. Well, that's what they have to do as a single car shipper. They have to do this staging and swapping around and moving of cars, and so you know, we know that we're all aware of what happens there. And again, because of limited space, we've got those extra tankers parked uptown when GLE tracks are full. We reached out to the BNSF crews, and they basically said, in their estimation, that there's an average of 8 to 10 crossing events per week here in Watertown across 212, okay? And that equates to roughly 32 to 40 per month. And they're nearly always during peak traffic hours, right? I mean, I'm gonna run this quick errand at noon, and then you get caught there, and now you got to explain to others why you're late for meetings. And I define peak traffic hours as 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. here. So under unit train operation, first of all, there would be 4 loops or 4 tracks within the one loop. And each track is capable of holding an entire 96-car train. The train would arrive and it would come through, and it would basically have minimal interruption, if any, and just come in, and other than it taking time to clear the, you know, the 96 cars to clear. It would enter our loop and kind of curl itself up in there. The engines would unhook, and then it's on our property and available for us to manage and fill and stage for the next departure. On the departure, I call it the hook and go departure concept. It eliminates this back and forth staging that occurs. The engines come in, they hook up to the 96 car string, they air up, they get ready, and they're out of there and they're gone. Now they're gonna cross 212 again. Just doing some math, if they travel at about 10 miles per hour, and we have reason to believe that that's about what they travel at, they will clear 212 in about 8 minutes. I don't know what it is now. I know that we would have some, you know, probably some additional time at times. Sometimes maybe it's quicker than that, but again, that's kind of our assumption of how this would work. Again, we would have minimal need to park extra tankers uptown, and this would equate under a unit train facility, and this is actually based on the production out of Mina. So we have real live data to base this on. There would be 12 crossing events per month versus the 32 to 40 that we currently experience. Now, the other thing is that we all need to keep in mind is these unit trains run at all hours of the day. And we've actually got time logs for the entire 2015 that show when these trains come and go. So half of those are occurring during non-peak hours, or some of them, in the case, some of them are in the middle of the night. And here we go. I mean, of our 80 ethanol units up in Mina, this is actual real live data that we pulled. About 45 of those 80 were between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., and 35 of them were between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. So almost a 50-50, certainly as close as you can get without being there. DDG units, our distiller units, would look about the same in terms of arrivals and departures. We didn't gather that information. Once we saw this, we felt like this was, and our crews up there are telling us that DDG units look and act the same way as an ethanol unit. So kind of moving into some of the other concerns we've heard about with this project. What about the flood concerns? We are designing this project with a zero rise goal, and designation is that designation has been held intact so far. You saw the waterway through the middle of the property, and it follows the lowest elevation. We may very well have a better capability to handle a high water event with this design than we currently do. And then FEMA, the FEMA consultant has approved our plan, and now it's in front of FEMA for approval. What about the bridge? I mean, we've had some discussion early on about this bridge. We've dug into that, and we've did some fairly extensive review of the engineers' recommendations. First, we had to understand why the bridge was being weight limited the way it was, and after we actually went under the bridge and saw some of the deterioration that's occurring. There's really the option that we would be willing to partake or include in the project is an option that would provide a estimated 30-year life for $400,000. We've added that into our project budget. It would eliminate the weight limits. It would replace the deck. It would replace the beams that hold the deck, and will allow HESCO unlimited or unrestricted service and access. The only thing we'd be looking for from the city going forward is the maintenance of that bridge. What about affected businesses? We're working with Little River City on a customer diversification plan. We've introduced a blender pump program that the governor's office has in front of them, or that they've been pitching. We've been working with folks over there to try to diversify their customer base. They have shared with us that they're heavily dependent on their casino, and so we would like to try to maybe drive some other traffic in there that would, and if we can get them retrofitted with blender pumps, we think we can drive our shareholders and our loyal followers to that location. I'm not opposed to even handing out coupons good for cash purchases over at Little River City to our employees, to Dakota Bodies employees, to people in the trailer court, or whatever we need to do for a period of time to get people moving that direction. So we're very conscious of their concerns, and hope that we can work with, provide a plan that they can benefit from. We're working with HESCO on the egress. That was a concern of theirs. In the event of emergency, they're concerned that they don't have any way to get out other than over that bridge. We will actually have a 13-foot wide access road all the way around that track. The only thing separating HESCO from that access road, or from the general public from that access road, would be basically a gate on existing Broadway. So we'd have to give HESCO some access to that gate so they could open it and get out in the event of emergency. In my discussions with Mr. Henrik, he felt that was more than acceptable, and certainly not something we'd want to continue because of the, you'd be driving right next to rail cars, and of course we don't want that to be a public road, but certainly in a short-term event it would be workable. Dakota Bodies really had no concerns over this. They've, and again, we would, coming from their management, I'm sure some of the employees might say, well, that was my way up to get whatever. If I want to run errands, we would again make sure that they had some access if they were, as Little River City has indicated, if this is a part of their clientele, we would make sure that we provide some benefit for them to continue that relationship. What about cutting off uptown? Of course, you know what they say about opinions. Everybody has one. I don't see this. We don't see this as a concern. I pulled some traffic on Broadway north of 212 toward the uptown area, and it's been constant since the 20th Avenue bypass opened. It ranges from 3,700 in 2008 to 3,500 in 2014. Interestingly enough, there was a period in there where it peaked at 4,000 vehicles. I think, of course, Shane is new to town. I've been here those years, and I can't explain why Broadway north of 212 would have those fluctuations unless it was seasonal or maybe some other road was closed. But those are the numbers. I think people will continue to use Broadway to the north of 212. In our opinion, the closure of Broadway south of 212 would have absolutely no effect on people finding their way uptown.
Jim, if I may, I'd like to just jump in there. I actually, or I should say we did, we actually hired people to sit out there and count the cars that went from South Broadway across Highway 212. And on Saturday, from coming across from the south to across to the north, throughout the day there were 67 cars. On Tuesday, now Saturday of course is kind of a shopping day, and I would assume Tuesday the same person sat out there and counted 56 cars. Just to give you an idea that what is crossing Highway 212 coming into town.
So minimal impact on these 3,500 numbers, really.
Jim, where are those numbers coming from? Where did you obtain those numbers?
I received those from the city engineer's office.
Okay.
So again, South Dakota Highway 20 and US 81 still are the most viable ways to uptown from the 20th Avenue bypass, and I don't see that changing as part of this closure. There was a suggestion, well, maybe we can split the train. We have asked this very question, and I think we put it out in front of the council at the last November meeting. And the answer that we're receiving from the railroad, it's not a practical or workable solution. And if you kind of put yourself, okay, so let's assume we tried this. First of all, the BN is not agreeable to trying it, but let's assume they did. I can assure you that based on what we're doing in Mina, we would be on those crossings for extended times, almost on a daily basis, maybe except for the weekends, and I feel like it would cause more frustration than the crossing at US 12. So once we're up there and it's unpredictable and we're there blocking that way, trying to move cars back and forth, traffic is just going to avoid that street altogether. So now you're back to, well, what's the purpose of the street? And certainly if we've got people in through Broadway and we've got parts of trains and we're moving, it creates additional safety concerns for us. And so I just don't see this as something that is practical and workable.
Jim, you may have answered this question here before, but explain the four loops. Not that it changes the overall what we're addressing, but can you just give it a brief?
We've kind of tossed this around in our minds too, Glenn. That do we need four loops? And of course, the BN has to approve this project and the design of this project, and really the four loops are for. Let's assume, and this happens in our Mina plant, let's assume we have a full ethanol unit ready to go and another one coming back. So you need two tracks just for that, two tracks in the loop just for that. Now take yourself over to the DDG side of our business. You got a full one there, almost full, and you got an empty one coming back. you need 2 more tracks for that too.
And the 32 to 40 crossing events per month, that includes the DDG trains in too, or is that just the ethanol?
Well, that's where we're at existing today, and that includes mixed product.
Okay.
When they come in now, they grab the full tankers and they grab the full hopper cars, and these crossing events start to occur. In this particular situation, you're gonna have them coming in or bringing in all tankers or all hopper cars, and unless there's some upset in Wilmer or some other point, I would not see a situation where they mix those. Okay, so what about the environmental impact? We've had a few questions out there about this. We are talking with the NRCS and the FSA office. A question that I've posed for the mayor is, would this be compatible with the city's wetland bank? I mean, we certainly would be open to leaving some space for that. I mean, we're down in a low area. I would think that this would be ideal for that kind of compatible to that kind of a project. And it's very probable, if not definite, that we will convert the rest of that tilled ground in that loop to CRP or some sort of conservation easement, and that's what I'm talking to the folks at the FSA about.
Shane, can you maybe step in there and just give us a little history again about the wetland banks and how that works, and if it would qualify for that?
Well, wetland banks, if you have sporadic littler or smaller wetlands throughout the community that development's gonna overtake, what you do is you consider having a wetland bank area that's within the watershed, but it's not located where those developments are happening, and usually they are in the lower areas, like the area along Broadway down here. So we could easily bank up some wetlands, you know, several acres, so that way when a different part of town needs to encroach on wetlands, we have available space to just easily.
So are you saying that if you got some spot up north here on a development, we could fill that wetland in, use this that you banked over here? Is that correct?
Typically, that's allowable, yes.
Or come into our loop and create the wetland. Again, the project timeline is fairly quickly here. I mean, our intent is to move dirt this spring with a fall 2016 completion. You know, there's some contingencies here. Of course, the FEMA approval, the BNSF approval to close Broadway. And then, you know, this bridge, we need to make sure that gets replaced. And the option I think we put in front of the engineer's office was, you know, roughly a 45 to 60-day project. We would need to have that bridge replaced before we could close off HESCO from the south.
In that time being, you could be working on construction of your own.
We would be in the back part of the property,
Yep.
more than likely building the deck or the berm for the rail track, yes. Just some, you know, this is something that I think we all like to see when we, you know, I sit on the board of the Watertown Development Corp, and when there, you know, our mission is to take care and provide a favorable business environment for existing businesses as well as new business. Well, GLE is an existing business since the early part of the century, 2001 or 2 is when it was founded. We employ 120 with an average of 50,000 plus per year. The annual taxes, sales and property taxes are over $4 million. And of course, any reinvestment of this nature would add to the property tax base and boost those tax numbers up. But there's something different about GLE as well, and that's the profits that are distributed back to the shareholders, the local owners of this company. That's why we're in business, is to take this product, this corn that's grown in the area, add value to it, and then give it back. If we simply put this on a train and shipped it out so that somebody else could add value to it, we would lose this opportunity to retain this wealth in the area. $93.6 million in the past 2 years. You might want to remember that number. Our margins are way down this year. But the last 2 years have been very, very good to GLE and consequently to this community too. We've estimated that about 55 to 60% of our shareholders live in the Cottington County or the contiguous counties that feed into the Watertown area and do their shopping. We see these license plates every weekend and during the week. So, 55% of that, or maybe even 60% of that number stays in town, and it's regenerated through the community. And of course, our hope is that it generates sales tax revenues. How important is value-added agriculture to Watertown? I think recent sales tax collection trends kind of tell us that story. When agriculture does well, everyone benefits, including those of us that live in the city. These guys come in, they buy equipment, they buy vehicles, they spend that money. And so everyone benefits. And we are a value-added agricultural business. Here's the loop again, and I guess with that, if we have any other questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
I just wanted to mention on that slide previous to that, when you talk about when agriculture does well, when you go out to the farm show this last week, it was just buzzing with people, talking about the new tractors and new things like that. When they do well, Watertown does well. We depend upon that.
Jim, the so-called tank farm or whatever you're going to call it that you would use to fill cars with,
Yes.
is that fed by pipeline from the main plant then, or?
It would be, Randy, it would be fed by a pipeline that kind of follows generally this direction. It will, it will follow our rail and go back down to, I suppose a point in the plant where, in a current tank farm where, yes.
Yeah.
It'd be
How-
above ground tank.
Okay, how would you,
Above ground pipe.
how would you feed the distiller's grain to that point?
We would be loading the distillers. That's a great question and a difficult one. It's not practical and just feasible to build a facility out here and then try to convey distillers grains. We would fill those cars back here and then push them out into the loop and then construct our train out there. If you could envision us pushing 5 cars out there, grabbing 5 empties, bringing them back in, and kind of that process would keep repeating itself.
I didn't see the number in your slides, Jim, but the South Broadway traffic usage has decreased considerably in recent years, down to something like 1,100 vehicles per day. I don't know if you would know this, or Shane, how was that 1,100 arrived? Is that, in other words, if one car goes both directions, is that count as 2, or are we only counting one side of the road?
If they take the same path to and from town, they're counted twice. So
Oh.
roughly the last time a counter was put out there, it generated just over 1,100 vehicles. Again, there are so many variables to which day of the week or which week of the month. All of those things can impact those numbers. Obviously, that seems a little bit high compared to what our observer that sat out there does or has counted. I mean, certainly we had probably more than 50 or 60 cars in the whole day, but in the time frame that they're there, that's a pretty low count.
Just to be
So-
clear, that 60 cars is cars that went straight across 212, not took left or right.
Correct.
Yeah, so, okay.
Shane, when you made that count, was that prior to the bypass construction or
The 1,100
Yeah.
number was after.
after? Thanks.
My understanding, the number, Mr. Bueller, before the bypass was 3 times that.
That's correct.
People that live in that area, has anybody asked them anything about this? Is this an issue for them, or do they take the bypass, and now with 81 going to get that roundabout, will that take care of the people that live? There are quite a few people that live down there. I don't know I really don't know if they use that new road, or if they try to get on 81, or what does happen.
Well, I would have to assume that since the drop in the the Broadway traffic dropped to a third, that they're using the bypass. I mean, going from 3,300 to 1,100 would seem to me that they're finding ways to get east or west other than going up Broadway. Dan, I don't know. I mean, I'm still kind of, it's an open question how that roundabout's gonna work down there with all the truck traffic. And, I mean, we've talked to the state about that, and they claim that, you know, have no worries. This has been proven in other states, and they've run every model they know to run through there, including the extra long doubles that we see. So, you know, will those folks that live down there, will they adapt to that bypass, or that roundabout? I can tell you that, that corner does make me nervous, every time I have to go through it. You know, it's kind of a, should I step her down and try to get through right here, or should I just wait another 5 minutes, because there's cars coming from both directions? And, so, I would think the roundabout hopefully will improve that trip. So I don't know. I mean, and maybe to answer your first question is, we have had some informal feedback from the trailer court. We've not done a formal survey. We've not been over in there knocking on doors, but we've had some feedback, and, you know, it's really doesn't seem to be of concern. And I was kind of hoping that if there would be some, I mean, we're here tonight. I'm gonna be on What's Up tomorrow. Kind of hoping to hear some of it, but, and we may actually do something, I'm not quite sure, we may do something to inform or educate those folks about the decision coming up in front of the council, just to make sure that they know what's coming.
Shane, when is the roundabout scheduled to go in over there? It's like
2018.
18? So this is, if everything goes through, Jim, this is going to be in place about 1.5 to 2 years in advance of the roundabout. And
Yes.
so that's going to put more traffic to that corner than what we're seeing today. Those 1,100 cars got to go somewhere, or whatever their number is, 500, 800, whatever it is. So that would be, certainly that's one cause of concern. That's a terrible corner. I almost got killed there going down to Lake Ponce last summer. And so I know it's bad, and you guys are there all the time. So, that almost 2-year period with no fix for that corner probably is a concern, though. At least it's certainly a consideration.
Well, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think the first fix would be to lower the speed limit going through there.
The city has made that request and has not gotten a positive response, because they anticipate the speeds will go down with the construction of the roundabout. Everybody's gonna have to slow down to negotiate that, so they're kind of in a wait and see pattern, but I did make a request to reduce the speed limit.
I actually have 3 questions, and you can answer them in whatever order you want. Now, I believe I recall that we've spoken with the fire department and the police department on response times if we close that access to Broadway. And then the last question I had, we were talking about economic impact, and I recall when the plant was first being built that there was a tremendous impact on the municipal utilities and how much utilities you used. And is that something that's going to continue to benefit the entire community? Their buying capacity stay big? Are you going to increase production? Do you understand where I'm going with that? Is that something that
Yes. The feedback we've received, or at least, I got an email today from the assistant chief, wants us to consider supporting his project out west of the airport there. I guess there's another phase coming up. And in the email, he did share that he is in full support of our project. So I think we enjoy the support of police and fire, and if I remember right from a previous comment the mayor made, is that there's no concerns on either department there. As far as the economic impact, the GLE's we're about 1/5 or 20% of the production in the state, and the South Dakota ethanol producers a while back did a study, and if you take the results of that study and just say, well, for simplicity purposes, let's take a fifth of it, we're about a $700 to $800 million economic impact in the state using the results of that study. Now, part of that is over at our Mina plant, clearly, and the most of that is going to be in the way that corn is marketed in this area. You know, we've got a couple of board members that can remember the days when corn was 92 cents under the Chicago Board of Trade price, and you know, we haven't seen those levels. We might see it for a week here or there during harvest when there's no place to go with this corn, but we haven't seen those levels for quite some time. So that's going to be the bulk of that impact, is for those corn farmers to get a better price for their corn, and that's what they had envisioned when they founded this plant. So, I mean, we based on the stats that we've ran at the state level, at the state association level, we proudly claim that 700 to 800 million impact, and primarily in northeastern South Dakota. And then to answer your question about the utilities, we have purchased natural gas directly from the market. And interestingly enough, we just signed an agreement with the Watertown Municipal Utilities for the throughput costs, and that forced our costs up by almost $90,000 a year. So, you know, obviously we recognize the importance of having a good, strong utilities department. We continue to support that. And, you know, we know that they bend over backwards to keep our service constant, and as managers of our company, you know, when you see a cost increase like that coming, you say, okay, well, you know, you can't get by without utility services, and so you sit down with them and you kind of reassure each other and make sure the relationship's intact, and I think we've done that, and we've got very strong bond with those guys over there in utilities. So I can't say I understand exactly the part of the business that, you know, do we benefit the city of Watertown? I'd like to think so. I think that, you know, an increase of 90,000 in 1 year is some evidence that that's occurring.
Well, it's huge, Jim, when you take a look at, you know, you have your throughput cost, but we also receive a tax on everything that goes through. So that's how the city of Watertown is generating the dollars. Shelley, I don't know what the impact is through the utilities, but I was thinking it was between $200,000 and $300,000 a year is what Glacial Lakes generates for the city of Watertown, just on the tax that comes through. And with the new throughput, you know, going into the utilities, it'll truly benefit Watertown, absolutely.
Now you're making me think I didn't do a good enough job negotiating. $90,000 increase on $200,000.
See, Jim, I got a question. How big, when you have a tank car full of ethanol, how many gallons in that? About 30,000?
Yeah, just under 30,000.
Okay. And on a typical day or week, if I was to walk out into your property as well as the area north of Highway 212, where all those tracks are at, how many cars would you guys have there, both empty and full? On average, about.
You know, and it varies, Mike. I don't know. I mean, it varies. It's based on how the cars move. I've noticed, you know, I've noticed cars chocked in by Watertown Co-op there and over by, by the salvage yard and you know, kind of all over back in there. And then you go back the next week and they're all gone. So, you know, it kind of varies how they move. But I believe our ethanol fleet in Watertown is roughly, our tanker fleet for Watertown is roughly 600 cars, 600 cars. And we want to cut that in half. So, you know, we would have considerably less cars to deal with. And the reason we can do that is because these trains will turn quicker. Right now, our average is about 35 days once we ship a car out and it comes back. With a unit train facility, it's about 16 to 17 days, and so you get better use of the cars.
I also wanted to mention, you know, when we talked about the impact that you have on our natural gas, one of the advantages that Watertown has with with you folks being out there, it lowers our cost of natural gas coming into Watertown because of the amounts that come through the line. So it is a benefit to Watertown, the citizens of Watertown, on the utility bills, keeping those, excuse me, keeping those prices lower on our natural gas purchases.
Well, I'd like to think of it as a two-way street, Mayor. I think, we certainly benefit from having a more robust and state-of-the-art utilities department. And from that, the citizens benefit. At the same time, the citizens benefit when there's somebody like us on the other end of the line too. And so, I'd like to think it's a kind of a mutual beneficial agreement or situation.
Jim, if you were to go back to emergency response time, I think what a lot of people fail to do is look at the impact of the whole community. I mean, if you look at the impact of the whole community response time, and if you're taking those trains off of Highway 212 and you're limiting that, that's going to increase the response time to the whole community a lot. I mean, I don't know how many times a police car or ambulance or fire truck has been stopped at a railroad crossing. So if you're going to eliminate that by a third or half, you're going to increase the response time or decrease the response time in the whole community.
Well,
So-
Randy, you're going to decrease the number of times that a emergency vehicle will get hung up there. And really, again, we're going from 30 to 40 crossing events during the course of any given month to, and that's per the BNSF estimate, to really to 6. Because we're going to have 12 crossing events, but remember, 6 of those or 5 of those are going to be at night. So now you can have emergency vehicles moving at all times of the night, but again, I don't know what their stats would be as to when most of their calls are, but I'm going to guess that most of them are during the daylight hours.
The other issue, and let's not forget, that Highway 212 is not our only issue. We have your trains that go north have either 4 or 5 other intersections that they need to close. So, those are our ability to respond as well. It depends on what direction we're trying to respond to.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you for being here. I know that this went through the Planning Commission, if I'm not mistaken. Shane, how did that end up as?
Planning Commission recommended approval of the vacation.
This will come in front of the council on March the 7th as a public hearing, I'm not mistaken. The public will be asked if there's anyone that speaks in favor of or against it, and that'll happen on the 7th of March. So if there are no more questions, thanks, Jim. I sure appreciate it. And
Thank you.
yep. Okay. I had one that I wanted to bring up to you guys, and I just asked Spencer to put it up. As you know, we had some issues at the clubhouse out at the golf course, and we kind of took some ideas and put it out in front of some of the contractors and what it would cost to bring that up to speed. What we did, and I think there's about 8 pictures on there, different looks, different colors, what could happen. This is actually looking from kind of that, what would you say, the north side, Mike? Looking south in the clubhouse. Yeah, main entrance off to the side. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Same thing. This is just in gray. There's some darker ones. I think that that can be shown. The current cost of doing this, what we've gotten for bids back from 4 different contractors, is approximately $25,000 to redo the clubhouse out there. Put in the new drop ceiling, put in some lights, put in some, it's called a mini split into the cooking area so that you aren't losing all your air conditioning up through the ventilation that they're using in that. So this is something that will go in front of the committee that we put together that works for the, kind of a vision process out at the golf course. So that group will get together. They're going to look at this and just kind of hash it over. It's currently under $25,000. There was something on the agenda tonight. I think you'll see it. It was gosh, what is the machine called? It's a knife sharpener. Is that correct, Jay? Real grinder. Yeah, the real grinder, more than likely, you will look at it and reject those particular bids. They say they don't need it anyhow this particular year, so we'll probably have the council just take a look at that and change the dollars over in a different area to use for this. So I would encourage anybody who wants to talk about this at some time. Mike is on that committee. Mike and Jay, and there's a number of them on there. What is it, about 5 or 6 we got, Mike? Yep. Just to look at the changing of the clubhouse a little bit, bring it up to speed, see if there's anything else needed out there, and just some visioning process. And we're going to also have that group work with Jay and work with Todd out there on what they have for capital improvement plans in the future. So that's kind of where we're at. Any questions on this? It's kind of exciting.
Do you suppose this will help my golf game?
I would think so.
A $30 million addition would not help your golf game.
Anybody got any questions on that? What the plan is? What's going on? Anybody else want to bring up anything else going on in town you want to talk about? Got a few minutes here.
Steve, it was,
Yeah.
with your,
Well, it's just, I think, John, this question's for you, for the event center. Curious when the Fury fights are going to be out there. Do you know? Just so you know that, I know we talked to Jen out at in Pier. They're absolutely on top of this. You know, that's the attorney that works for the state of South Dakota. The person running these fights has numerous things that they had to jump through to get it done and to get it approved.
February 27th, Saturday.
Okay. Okay, Dan, what do you got?
the last time I talked to you, you were going to discuss the hockey rink things, and I don't know if this is appropriate now to ask. I've been gone, so I didn't follow up on what you had heard or where we are with hockey rinks.
As a matter of fact, Shelley and I were at a meeting today, and we had the opportunity to look at the new rinks and the two rinks on it, how many seating, you know, it's over 2,000 seats in it. Two rinks, it's extremely nice. It looks very, very nice. We're just trying to make sure that the dollars are there and everything is squared away for it.
So no timeline yet, or maybe a timeline?
No timeline as of yet, yeah.
Anybody see they were out there burying light poles out at the new softball field? It looks like they got all of them in, so.
I didn't see that.
You got to get out of your office more
I
often.
think so, yeah.
Either that or it's too close to my office, one or the other, so.
Anything else? Okay, at this time I will adjourn this meeting, and we'll be back at 7 o'clock for the